Hello guys, Art-Teeves here. In this video, I'll cover the process of modeling, UV unwrapping and texturing this stylized Spider Cannonbot character in 3ds Max, Rizom and Substance Painter. Let's get started. Quick heads up, like all my videos, this one's partially unvoiced, so you can focus on the workflow. If you're finding this useful, smash the subscribe for more stylized content. Full timestamps are in the description and comment section below. Also you can inspect the final topology on Sketchfab. I won't be animating this guy anytime soon. However, if I did want to animate him, I'd probably use the 3ds Max's cat helper system that has a spider rig. I begin by creating several separate models using NURMS editing. What I particularly appreciate about this method is that it automatically generates spherical connection points with 16 sides, simplifying the process of connecting modules with splines. If you want to add custom models, you can use Proboolean to cut spheres or cylinders out of them, then auto-retopologize the result. Adjust the number of iterations until you achieve a clean, workable mesh. My entire model is a single object with roughly 13k polygons and vertices. Since I don't follow the traditional high-to-low poly baking workflow, my Cannonbot could technically be classified as a mid-poly model. There's still significant room for optimization. For example, most wires and legs currently have 16 sides each, which could easily be reduced to 9 or 12 without sacrificing quality. I also use chamfers on most edges, which isn't ideal for poly count efficiency. Some of these details could have been achieved through painting or baking instead. The main eye module currently uses 24 sides. It could definitely benefit from some manual retopology work, but for now I'm keeping it as is. All legs are designed for bone-based animation. They consist of rigid metal segments connected by long rubber joints. The latter are reinforced with support loops to ensure clean deformation during bending. Surface details are later applied in Substance Painter. For rigid mechanical components, I recommend implementing them as separate objects rather than trying to integrate them into the deformable geometry. This approach typically yields better results for hard surface mechanical movement, yet I prefer to stick to simple and convenient biomechanical contraptions. The real trick with models such as this one is balancing side counts, enough for good shading, but not so many that we blow up the poly count. As I've mentioned before, we've got some obvious fat to trim. While it's not breaking anything now, this little guy is begging for a proper manual retopology pass. I encircle most openings or intersecting seams between round elements with circular loops of near square polygons. Also, it is a good idea to enlarge and exaggerate some elements like the gun, so that the model retains its overall cartoony design. If you decide to use the Proboolean tool, it is usually the best practice to isolate the components you plan to boolean from the main model. Only apply the modifier to properly intersecting geometry, ensuring clean overlaps. This workflow significantly reduces potential mesh artifacts and preserves your model's integrity. Naturally, we should avoid adding some small yet excessively detailed elements. Take the size Stinger, for instance. It currently has 16 sides and relies on numerous supporting edge loops. For optimal animatability, I recommend modeling it in a simplified T-pose or neutral position, and handling any bending or deformation during the animation phase rather than in the modeling stage. This model isn't using any load variance, so we're strategically employing triangles on flat, non-deforming surfaces where they don't impact shading quality. My modeling process for this character involved a fair amount of preemptive planning and improvisation. Since I didn't use reference images, I iteratively designed modular openings and connections, allowing different components to integrate organically as the model evolved. This modular approach also offers flexibility. You can easily swap out systems like weapons to create distinct variants of the same base model. Now that I reconsider, we could certainly add external models as separate objects even after filling all the pre-planned openings. That said, I personally prefer modeling cohesive assets like this one as single unified objects. Should you decide to add some separate objects, make sure they intersect each other naturally but never share any vertices or planes. This prevents Z-fighting. Z-fighting happens when two surfaces occupy the exact same space in a 3D scene. Since the graphics card can't decide which one to show, they flicker as they fight to appear on the top. To optimize the model, I manually reduce the poly count and clean up edge loops using the loop regularizer script. When additional loops are needed, I often insert them while holding Shift key. This forces 3ds Max to respect the existing geometry and maintain proper edge flow. For wires and hoses, we can strategically collapse edges along flat surface areas to reduce side edge count. Since these modifications occur on planar geometry, the introduced triangles won't impact shading quality. I've skipped some parts of the video that demonstrated the meticulous process of adding a couple of hoses. They are no different than the others. Exaggerating proportions allows us to preserve some kind of a stylized comical look. After completing the model, I finalize the smoothing groups and center it to the word origin 000 scene coordinates. Then I perform a thorough quality check, first hunting down any angons, polygons with more than 4 edges, then using the 3ds Max's XView tool to identify problematic geometry, like overlapping or isolated vertices, and open edges. The complete model utilizes a single 4K resolution UV map with 16 pixel padding. All seams are strategically placed along hard edges, and UV islands were straightened in Rizom UV to minimize texture distortion. The layout maintains strict separation with no overlapping UVs. For optimal results when implementing load variants or implementing distance-based UV scaling, I recommend increasing the padding to 32 pixels to prevent texture bleeding at reduced resolutions. Strategic UV seam placement is key. We can either position them alongside accessible edges for easy Substance Painter repairs with the clone stamp tool, or hide them in less visible areas. As an added solution, switching to triplanar projection in Substance Painter typically makes most seams disappear completely. Pay special attention to straightening all UV chucks containing wires. This will be essential for properly adding consistent details along their lengths in texturing. After normalizing UVs in 3ds Max, I perform manual scaling to allocate more texture space to visually prominent elements. Conversely, I reduce the size of UV chucks that will be obscured or less visible during typical use. When adjusting UV island sizes, make sure to maintain relative proportions within the same object. It's generally good practice to keep UV size variations within 20% of neighboring elements. Always scale UV islands uniformly per element. Any uneven scaling will create visible seams that Substance Painter can't fix, no matter what tricks you try. Before you send your model to different software, remember to reset its rotation angles, pivot points, scale, and X-form. Finally, I resize some UV chucks I want to resize and repack the model in Rizom. Then I return to 3ds Max and use its XView tool to scan my model for some overlapping UV chucks. Texturing this character relied on modified smart materials. I start by applying a default steel and increasing its roughness value. It will mostly be visible on edges. Next I create a rust layer and apply grunge scratches dusty to it. This layer is inverted. Finally, a paint layer is added and masked with grunge 007 that has a blur slope filter applied to it. Its intensity divider is set to 10 to give our paint a somewhat stylized comical look. We use anchor points to control layer intersections and create an illusion of paint towering above scratches. I layer 4 variations of our base material to create a weathered paint effect. This multi-material approach mimics natural wear patterns, giving the gunbot those spots of etched and chipped paint. At this stage, you can experiment with different grunges or smart masks. Next, I add 3 different leaks layers to different parts of the model. These only manipulate roughness data. For rubber hoses and joints, I use the Rubber Dry preset smart material. Next I copy it, make the copy darker, apply a black mask to it, and fill it with stripes, while playing with its rotation angle and tiling. As I've mentioned previously, setting projection mode triplanar hides most visible UV seams. Remaining seams can normally be hidden manually by using a paint layer that has all of its blending options set to pass through, and also by using the clone stamp tool. For lamps, I enable the emission channel in the texture set settings menu, and add the light emission for glowing elements and dark emission for dust and dirt. Before adding detailed layers, start by applying a uniform base material across your entire model. This ensures no surfaces remain accidentally untextured and provides a consistent foundation for subsequent weathering effects. For all emissive components, fully paint their base colors in your texture work. This ensures proper visual continuity when emission maps are disabled during rendering or gameplay. I begin by establishing a ground gradient layer for legs and body, then incorporate additional grunge passes. In my experience, you can never have too much weathering. There is always room for just one more grunge layer to achieve that worn-in look. I add light edge highlights to define shapes, then tweak the strengths as needed. This covers everything I wanted to mention. I'll stop narrating at this point. Thanks for watching, guys. If my videos are of use to you, be my guest and subscribe to my channel for more stylized content. And most importantly, have a great day.